say the Q word. Oh, is it to do with quiet? Don't say the Q word.
Dementia did soften her slightly. So that there was some funny times. The staff were always really good. They would have you laughing. And I was, probably Gran's favourite.
We knew she knew us. So even when she couldn't say our names anymore, she couldn't say those kind of specifics. We knew she knew us.
So today we have been let loose in one of our hospitals. We're in Ward B47 at Queen's Medical Centre. This is one of our healthcare for older people wards. And we're meeting two sisters who know QMC very well. Laura is one of our members of staff. She works in radiology. And both Laura and Amy also know QMC from a patient's perspective, because their grandmother was diagnosed with vascular dementia on this very ward, and she was cared for by this brilliant team. Now, although this was over 10 years ago, Amy always knew she wanted to eventually do something to give back, and she's now written a children's book, My Granny is Changing, which has actually made both Amy and Laura realise they'd never actually processed what happened to their granny until now. Please welcome to Don't Say the Q Word, Amy and Laura Bunting. Hello. Nice to see you both. Great to have you on the podcast. So, how old were you both then when your granny was diagnosed? Is it granny? Do we call her granny? What did you actually call her?
No, she was Gran.
Gran.
And I changed it for the book because I just felt it sounded softer. So I introduced Granny, but also it started the line where she started becoming a character for me, rather than it literally being my grandma in the book.
But it is based on.
Oh, it's fully based on my gran, yes. But I needed to develop that space so that I could get the book to where it is now.
Let's go back to then the age you were. This is obviously aimed at young children. You were not young children at this point, but still young enough that it would have been traumatic, confusing, hard to deal with, all those things, because it doesn't matter what age, does it actually? If you're seeing a loved one going through what your gran went through, then processing it, understanding it is difficult, isn't it? So what age were you both then?
We were early 20s, weren't we? Because we were only 2 years apart from each other. And I think I was about 21. I just did, obviously younger one, so sorry. So you were a little bit, 24?
I think it would have been about 20, about 24, when we were at this age at the hospital,
Yeah. We'll talk about this stage at the hospital, because actually this is the first time you've come back on Ward B47. So when we walked onto the ward, because we're in the daycare room at the moment, but when we walked onto the ward, you both had a moment, didn't you? You both kind of stopped, and I realised, right, after all these years, obviously this is the first time you've come back.
Yeah, the last time I would have been on this ward, we would have been with our girl. Yeah, she was here.
So how did that feel, walking back?
Strange, a bit daunting. But you realise that you're here for a bigger purpose. You're here to help other people. And it was the smell that came back to me first. It's got a certain smell to it that I could just remember straight away. The sounds, obviously seeing the people and what they're currently going through, and the staff, seeing that the staff are still doing just as amazing of a job that they did for our girl.
Are there any of the staff that you remember still here?
Well, Nikki said to me earlier that she recognised me. Yeah, when I first walked into the room, Nikki said that she actually recognised me. I wasn't too sure of recognising Nikki, but if I think about it now, there's something familiar about her. And there was a member of staff that I knew called James. My grandma always commented on how much of a gorgeous boy he was. Every time that he came onto the ward and in her eyesight, she would make that comment. And he was so lovely. He'd always go right into her face and say hello and be very attentive to her. I actually saw him recently on a corridor, just in passing, but I hadn't seen him since he was on this ward with my grandma. So it was like it was all a sign. The book was ready, and I saw the member of staff that I remember the most.
Fate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll talk a bit more about the book, but I wanted to kind of get a bit more of a sense of that time. So let's talk about Gran before she came here, because she was diagnosed on this ward.
Yes.
But leading up to that time, and I guess it's hard to put a kind of time frame on how long it was developing, but what do you remember? What were the signs? What were the things that you first thought, oh, actually, there's something a bit different about Gran, there's something going on?
There were sort of changes that started to happen, and we can't pinpoint exactly when it started, because obviously everything is so gradual, but there were things that just stood out as strange. So sometimes my gran lived in a flat before she came to the hospital. It was in a ward-aided complex, and it was lovely, and she had lots of friends there. But we'd go over, and sometimes there would be a cold bacon sandwich on the table, and we'd be like, Gran, why have you not eaten your lunch or whatever time we would have thought it was from? And she would be like, oh, Laura's coming over. And we're like, no, Gran, Laura's not coming over today. There's nothing in. And she was adamant that Laura was coming over. And we would know, like, it wasn't a particular day that Laura was visiting or something like that. But so she started she'd make food and leave it for people who we knew weren't going to be there that day that we happened to be there. Or she used to talk about the little men that lived on the roof opposite. So out of her window, it was all like a single layer complex. So you could see the top of the roof quite easily out of her window. And it had a cute little clock tower. And she used to talk about the little men that would come out of the clock tower and they would cut the grass on the roof. And so some of the things that you start picking up were these stories that were strange. And obviously now we know they're hallucinations. And there was a time where I clocked exactly what was happening. And she went through a phase with my mum of being quite angry with her or telling her off. And again, this is pre-diagnosis. We weren't sure what was happening. We just knew changes were happening. And yeah, there'd be times she'd tell my mum off and it'd be like, she's not done that, Gran. You don't need to worry, like. And then finally one day, I was sat in the room watching TV with her, and it was like one of those 70s cop shows. And this lady was like trying to fight someone, and she pulled out a gun. And my mum walked back into the room, and my gran immediately started telling her off and told her to put the gun away. And in that moment, I understood that Brian had started to confuse TV with actual life. And then adding the other things in, started to understand that she was experiencing sort of hallucinations and things weren't making as much sense to her as they used to.
So when she eventually came here then, Laura, there'd been quite a while, hadn't there, of not having an official diagnosis, but she was officially diagnosed here at QMC on this ward. Was there... How did that feel? Was there a relief that you finally knew and had answers, or did it make any difference? What? Talk me through it.
I'd probably say it did make a difference. I mean, it definitely would make a difference for our mum, because she was fighting for everything. She had been speaking to people, and she would notice the change even more than us. So it was validation for my mum that Gran could get the care that she needed. We could get support. And I suppose for us, it made sense. Even though we didn't know what dementia was, it'd never been part of our lives. We didn't know anything about it, part of the word. I suppose coming in here allowed us to be able to start learning more about that and be able to give Gran the best quality of care that she needed, because at the end of the day, it's about her quality of life. So the pieces started to fall into place that had been missing for a little while.
And I think getting that diagnosis and getting the word meant that other people could help us, because they knew what it was. So it wasn't just like my sister said, just my mum trying to get the proper care for my gran, but we didn't have the words to explain what was happening. And then when we had that diagnosis, then everyone else understands what's happening. Even if you don't fully understand yet, the medical teams understand, and you can start getting the support that your loved one needs.
So for people who are maybe just starting on this journey and maybe recognising some of those things you described, the men who are on the roof, you know, these hallucinations, or just little things like, I mean, I know you talk about in the book, like you find something where it shouldn't be, and all those little things that are quite common, aren't they, in that whole journey of dementia. What would you say to them is what you've learned from how to deal with it? So, for example, do you when your gran was diagnosed, did she understand that? Did you even talk to her about it? Was it more for your benefit? How much do you tell that person, I guess?
I wouldn't say Gran really.
I don't think she knew.
I think she knew she was in hospital. She knew that things weren't right. She knew things had changed, or maybe in her mind she could feel the change. She couldn't do her hair anymore. She couldn't help to wash herself. So a lot of the things that Gran was very, very independent for, all of that just completely went. So I suppose I don't think she knew she had dementia, but she knew that something was happening.
Yeah.
But whether I never spoke to Gran about it. I just tried to keep Gran going forwards and tried to talk to her about her past if she wanted to. And you kind of just mould to them at the time of what is making them happy, because I want to give you as much happiness that you've got left.
And do you have happy memories of her when she was here? Yeah. Did she, because obviously you think of coming into hospital and you think, oh, that's never a good sign for most things, is it? Nobody wants to be in hospital. But I get the sense, certainly with the team here, you know, we're in the room where they do the regular monthly dementia tea parties, which are absolutely just a joy to just be a part of. And yet it would seem on the outside, that's quite sad, that's quite depressing. But you don't get that sense when you walk onto this ward, do you?
No, it is sad. It's you know that dementia is sad, but I suppose when we used to walk on the ward and I would see Gran smile, so she might not be able to say Laura or Amy, but she would know who we were by just our face, wouldn't she necessarily? So she would smile. There was a time I remember it was quite cold, and I'd got a woolly hat on, and Gran was sat in one of the big blue chairs with the good backs, and I put the hat on her head, and it was one that came off her head quite long, and it said New York on it, and I asked her to put a thumb up. So she sat there, putting her up, and she's got this hat on. And just again, seeing the little smile. Whereas if I'd have tried to do that to my Gran without dementia, she would have had none of that. Like, how I'd not have gone on her, she would not have had the photo. Whereas dementia did soften her slightly. So that there was some funny times. The staff were always really good. They would have you laughing. And she was putting this, I don't know what it was, but it helped her to get up and to go to the toilet, but without having to sit back down. So it wasn't a wheelchair. She didn't have to try and keep getting up and down. And they put her in it, and she, wee! And off she went down the corridor to go to the toilet. And even I was like, wow, I want to go on that. That looks brilliant. And it was the little things like that that gave you those memories that were good, not just bad at the same time.
And that's the most important part, isn't it? I mean, we forget that the staff aren't just here to do the medical side of things. You know, there's all-round care, isn't it? And it's about all-round well-being for the patients. So it's incredible. We forget all of that stuff that they have to do as well. Amy, so the book, My Granny is Changing then. You were determined, and we're going back over 10 years ago now since your gran passed away, but you were determined at that point, you don't work in healthcare. What can I do with my skills? Being a creative person, what can I do? So you've now finally put this book together, which has been how long in the making?
So literally, I had the idea about 10 years ago, and then I've worked on it on and off over that time, but I have solidly worked on it for about the last 2 years. So I work full time, but I've done this in my own time. So any pockets I can get, I've gone on different courses and things like that. And yeah, I've given it my all for the last 2 years. And then it's had spots throughout. And how we've talked a bit, it was my process. It took time to get to this point for many different reasons.
Because this was therapeutic.
Very, yeah. And I did not realise.
Explain.
So it's only the other week, because I finally had these printed in December, at the end of last year. And that was huge to finally, for it to be a real thing in my hand was massive. But then the time after that, there's more processing time. And I just sat speaking to someone and I suddenly understood that I processed my grief through this book. And I hadn't realized that happened. So at the start, when I started this book, so when I started trying to draw ideas about 9 years ago, I would sit and cry. And that always gets me.
That's why we've got a box of tissues.
Yeah. I can usually hold it enough, but my voice always cracks on it. But yeah, so at the start, I could only draw her realistically. I could not make my Gran a character. And that's why I mentioned earlier that who is in this book now is a character. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it in an incredibly positive way. Because for me, it shows my ability to process it and process the grief. So now she is Granny and she is fully based on my Gran. But it means that I've been able to process my grief and get to the point where I didn't need her to look exactly like my Gran. I've been able to take the essence of who she was.
And I would imagine it's really important to be able to separate the two, as well as obviously putting a lot of your Gran and your experience into it. Mm-hmm. And Laura, actually, you hadn't realised that you hadn't processed your grief until you started reading the book as well.
Yeah, mine's the complete opposite. I'd probably say for me and Mum. So I was, probably Gran's favourite. We were both dudes. Wow.
I didn't realise we were going to have a family dispute in mix.
We lost equally. But me and Gran just, our connection was just a little bit different once it.
But with like people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I suppose for me, with Gran, I kind of put Gran's death to the side and I just focused on go to work, follow your career, live your life, travel, and I pushed it to the side. And then Amy put in the book in front of me. I sobbed my heart out. I'm reading it every time. I still sob my heart out. I could cry now. Just because it makes you realise that you've not processed it. So I've got some work to do. Is what it's made me realise.
But isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
And I mean, that this book probably isn't just going to be for children then, is it? Based on
Absolutely not. No, it's like...
I mean, I know obviously you've chosen to do a children's picture book because it's a really helpful, a picture book's really good at kind of explaining complex subjects and breaking them down and making it simplistic. But actually, you imagine the parents and the grandparents reading that with their children, knowing, understanding the journey is going to bring a whole lot out for them as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
How does that make you feel, knowing you could have that impact on people?
That is the impact I want this book to have. I want this book to help everybody who comes across it. So whether you are small or a parent or you're older, just whenever dementia is affecting your life, if you need something that gives you that little bit of support, if the book can do a little bit of that, it is achieving what I made it for.
It's wonderful that you've been able to share your story, and I would imagine there'll be a lot of people listening to this, watching this, and completely relating to so many elements that you've said. What would you like your Gran to be remembered as or for? I mean, I know your mum told me that she used to think she was the Queen, so I guess that's one of the things.
What do you think?
Honestly, for me, no, just that she's my Gran.
Yeah, she loved it. She loved it. So I've never doubted that.
Yeah, and that's it. Laura's mentioned it a little bit already. The bit in the book where I touch on where she forgets your name, and Laura said, we knew she knew us. So even when she couldn't say our names anymore, she couldn't say those kind of specifics. We knew she knew us. And we knew that we were important to her.
Yeah.
And that felt like something really important to get across, because it's so painful when someone who's very important to you doesn't know your name anymore. But that's why I bring in the next bit where the mum of the story lets the child know that she still loves you. Even if she can't say your name, it's not that the love is gone. So that was like really, really important. And it took me a while to work out how to get that across. But I think I got there.
And that's amazing. And that will mean so much to a lot of people, because I imagine that must be probably the toughest part of all, and the part that people dread the most in the whole thing. Thank you both. I'm sure you sharing your story and certainly producing this book will be a comfort to a lot of people. I guess the final question would be then, what would you want to say to the staff on B47 who looked after your Gran and gave you those funny moments of her wheeling down to the toilet and all of that? What would you want to say to them?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we can express in it enough what these staff do on a daily basis. They do. I work here. I fit to work here because of it. So I cannot thank them enough.
Yeah, is thank you. And thank you for the support that they give all the families. Because, like we said, the diagnosis is where things changed. And from here, we were able to get the care that my Gran needed.
Thank you both so much. All that's left now is for you two to sign off the podcast, as we always do, with the name that everybody comments on, of course. So what do we have to tell everybody when they're coming to QMC or any hospital?
Don't say the Q word.
Don't say the Q word.